So we're continuing here on Daf Samaches Amid Beis, approximately 15 lines down from the top. Keman Rabbi Akiva. Notice who's the Tana, the Darshan, see extra Vav, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin Aleph Amid Beis records Machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel as to whether or not the extra Vav as a redundant letter lends itself to a drasha. Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that Nitan Lidrosh Miyuter Vav. Rabbi Shmuel Sober Ein Lidrosh. And the din, as we explained, of Bias Psul on a Levia Yisraelis, that apostles them for kahuna is derived from the extra Vav, Keman, Ki Rabbi Akiva, did Darish Vavin. He is of the opinion that we darshan Vavin. And there are those shitos like Rabbi Shmuel that disagree with him. The Gemara in Sanhedrin that we mentioned deals with the case of a Baskoin Zinsa, and Rabbi Shmuel holds that only as long as she's in Arusa, she's Besreifa. Once she's in Asura, like all married women, her din is Bechenek. Rabbi Akiva holds that even a Baskoin Asura has the din of Sreifa. The Gemara explains there that Rabbi Akiva darshans from the pasuk Ubas Ish Kohen Kisechel is no Savir Michalos Beishti Saref. It could have said Bas Ish Kohen. So Rabbi Akiva darshans Ubas, that the Vav is coming to teach me that even in the Sua is Bisreifa. Rabbi Shmuel holds no, that we don't dash the extra Vav. The Gemara says no. Afilu Tema Rabbanan, even if this din was sponsored by the Rabbanan who argue with Rabbi Akiva, don't ask me a question as to how do we derive the din of a Bia Poselis Bilavia V'Yisraelis, because even the Rabbanan agree that we can darshan from the Pasuk Bas Kohen to drashos. Kula, all of the words Ubas Kohen, Kra Yiserahu. The entire Ubas Kohen is redundant. It's unnecessary. It would have just sufficed to say V'chisia Le'ish Zar without adding Ubas Kohen. So from these extra words, Ubas Kohen, we're going to darshan that even a Levia and a Yisrael has become Nifsolos. And the pasuk itself is teaching me that a Bas Kohen Nifselis. So until now, we learned that a bias psul poselis vilecha b'truma. The Brisa says that a bias psul poselis vilinase lekohen. The Gemara says ashkechan letruma. We derive from a Bas Kohen kisia leish zar a psul truma sheino chelos b'truma, because lashon pasuk is ki b'trumas hakodshim lo sochel, but lekahuna minola. From whence do we derive the psul that she's not allowed to marry a Kohen? And the Gemara answers, Otu, shall we say that we derived Levia v'Yisraelis nifsolos, lo lekahuna marbina lahu? What would be the psul of a Levia v'Yisraelis if not for kahuna? There's no hava, of psul truma to eat l'truma b'nos mechal truma ninu. They can't eat truma b'beis aviyam in the Levi Israeli. So we don't need a pasuk to tell us that nifsolos Bios Pasul Bilechel Betruma, that only applies to Bas Kohen who eats Truma Bebeis Avia. Then we need a limud that she's Nifselis Bebia Lifsol Betruma. So therefore we must assume that Bas Kohen has to teach me these two extra words, not just the Psul Truma, but also Psul Kahuna. And the Gemara rejects it. Alam Allah. Why do you say you don't need a limud, a din that a Levia of Israel should be excluded from Truma? Mishkachesla, Achla b'shvil b'na. Right? She was married to a Kohen, this Yisraelis, a Levia, and he died, but he left her a son, and she's allowed to eat Truma because of her son. And therefore, we need a pasuk to teach me Bas Kohen to be mamai to exclude that she cannot eat Truma im nivel apostle. But as far as kahuna is concerned, to marry a Kohen, lo tifasa. So the Gemara answers that to derive this conclusion, that that a Levio Yisraelis becomes Sula from eating Truma in a case where she was married to a Kohen and he left her with a son and she's allowed to eat Truma B'Shvil B'nah, is that would be derived from a Kal V'chomer, that for sure she's Nifsalis L'Truma in that case, Kal V'chomer Mikohenes. Uma Kohenes D'Mikdusha D'Nafsha Ochla. That she, Mitzad Gufa, would eat Truma because she's a Kohenes and nevertheless be a Psul Pasala Milechel B'Truma. Is Levi Yisraelis T'lo Ochla, they don't have Kedushas Gufa, and they're only eating Truma El B'Shvil B'nah, Lo Koshken, how much more so should this be a Poselis? So once again, if we're going to derive the Psul Levi of Yisraelis from the Pasuk of Bas Kohen, it must be telling us about the Psul to marry a Kohen. And the Gemara rejects this Kal V'chom V'hiya no senes. On the contrary, that Mila that we find in Kohenes is really the Svara, the reason to be Matir and not Lesa. Kohenes the Kaddish Begufa, Kaddish Gufa, then Pasala. Now we understand why Bias Psul, Pasals of a Truma. But in the case of a Levi of Yisrael, the Lo Kaddish Gufa, she doesn't eat Mitzad Kedushas Gufa, but rather Mitzad Penah. We could argue that Bias Psulo Pasala, it would not Pasala. So therefore we need the Pasuk Bas Kohen as a ribui for Levi of Yisrael, Shenif Solos Machilas Truma. Because since it's Lo Kaddish Gufa, therefore I would say that Lo Pasala. So Gemara therefore concludes, Ella, the source from which we derive the Psula Kuna, is B'Kal V'chomer B'Bas Grusha. We're talking about Bas Kohen, who was married and divorced. She can never marry a Kohen. Grusha is Asura LeKohen. And here's the Kal V'chomer Uma, in the case of Bas Kohen, Grusha. Shemuteres B'Truma. That if she was divorced and her husband left her without any children, she goes back to Beis Avia to Achilas Truma, and nevertheless Asur LeKahuna, she's not allowed to marry a Kohen because she's a Grusha, is Zu, this one, Shenivala Lepasul, Shasura B'Trumenu Din Shepsul LeKahuna. And the Gemara now raises the objection of Masir Min Adin. Can you derive from a Kal V'chomer, a Zahara, of a lav that she cannot marry a Kohen? We have a principle established by the Gemara Makas Yud Zayin, Ein Mashirin, the Ein Manishin, Min Adin, Min HaKal V'chomer. So Gemara answers, no, we don't need the Kal V'chomer to teach us that if Nivel Apostala, Nifseles L'Kedushas Kahuna, that doesn't need a limit at all. From the fact that the Torah says she's not allowed to eat Truma, we're going to derive the conclusion that she's psula as far as Kedushas Kahuna is concerned, because Achilas Truma is itself a reflection of Kedushas Kahuna, and if she's excluded and disqualified from Truma, it must be because she's Nifselis Kedushas Kahuna. But we still have to know what's considered a pasul Kedushas Kahuna. And that's what we're going to derive from the Kal V'chomer. That Bia Asura is considered a psul Kedushas Kahuna, and that's Gili Milsa B'Almahu. It's only coming legalis, it's only coming to reveal, to establish that what's the psul Kahuna. But it's not teaching the din itself. The din itself can derive from Truma. And the Gilu is Ke'en Kal V'chomer. Now, keep in mind that the Gemara above on Amud Aleph brought a brisa that had an enumerated list of those who are posel, bibiyasam, kohenes, levi of Yisraelis. And these psulim b'biyasam generated an iser as an iser la. And the Gemara derives that these psulim are learned out of ubas kohen kisiya lishzak. So the Gemara says, V'yema, perhaps we would suggest that from this pasuk will derive that nivala lepasula chayve krisus, in a case where she had a bia of chayve krisus where there's no tfisus kedushin, then nifsala. Like, for example, if let's say she had a relationship with her own brother, how would we derive chayve lavim where there is tfisus kedushin like nasir umamza that they also pasal her lakuna? And the Gemara answers, ubas kohen kisiya amar rachmana. What do we derive from that language? Hanoch de ispu havaya. Chayve krisus to lav b'nei havaya. There's no tfisus kedushin. So the pasuk is talking about those psulim de ispu havaya, that she could be ishta. And that would have to be chayve lavin because kedushin atosim b'chayve lavin. It could not refer to chayve krisus because there's no tfisus kedushin. And here the Torah is saying kisiya de ispe havaya. So Gemara asks, hachi oved kochavim the eved lo lifsalu. If you're telling me that kisiya means kedushin tofsin, and that's a reference to chayve lavin, is oved kochav ve'eved, there's no tfisus kedushin, or chayve krisus is no tfisus kedushin, lo lifsalu. It shouldn't be a psul b'viyasa. And the Gemara answers, Hana, oved kochav ve'eved, pasli, we derive that poslim, me, the Rabbi Yishmael from the Drasha of Rabbi Yishmael, the Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yishmael, Minayin Lovi Kocham V'Eved Abal Bas Yisrael V'Kohenes U'Levia Shep Solua. How do we know in the case of a guy who had a relationship with a Bas Yisrael or Kohenes that she becomes psula l'truva? Shenemar Ubas Kohen Kisiya Almona Ugrusha V'Zera Eila V'Shavel Beis Avia Kenurea. And Rabbi Shmuel darshans from that which it says Almana Grusha, it doesn't see one of them, or Almana or Grusha, it says Almana U Grusha. The pasuk is coming to teach me that only if she got married, Lemicha Yeshlo Almanos Figerishinba, meaning that the Kedushin is Chalaleha. She could go back to Beis Avia to continue to eat Truma as she did before she was married, if she doesn't have any Zera from him. But Yatsu Ove Kocham the Eved She'ein Lo Almanos Gerishin, because there's no tfisus kedushin in the case of Almon of Eved and Akum, and therefore when they die or they divorce her, she doesn't have a shame Almona or Grusha. Is Eina Shovel Beis Avil Achilas Truma. So we have here a source for the din that Akum the Eved Pasel Me'achilas Truma.